Let me turn to Neil Herrington. Neil is the Senior Vice President for the Americas of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we would like to hear your views about how do you think we can advance on ethical, fair, and inclusive trade. Neil, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Primero unas palabras de agradecimiento en español a nuestros organizadores para su gran labor. Antes que nada, Su Excelencia Sánchez Orondo, le agradecemos mucho su labor, toda la colaboración de la Academia. Y yo creo que después de haber escuchado las palabras de su santidad, creo que todos nosotros coincidimos en el hecho de que no hay una entidad con más credibilidad para avanzar este diálogo que la Iglesia. Una palabra también de agradecimiento al gobierno argentino del presidente Fernández. Ustedes han hecho, Gustavo y Martín y todos los demás han hecho un gran labor para organizar este foro y tienen nuestro agradecimiento profundo. También a los ministros y ministras de mi región, con los cuales nosotros tenemos tantos vínculos y colaboración, pues estamos sumamente agradecidos y no contamos con un objetivo más importante que el apoyo de los objetivos de crecimiento tan importantes que ustedes tienen para sus propios pueblos. I come here with obviously I'm very clear-eyed about what I represent in this room. I want to say that obviously I've been listening very intently, I think, to the words about the private sector all day. I've heard a lot of very valid concerns, and I'm also under no illusions that I'm going to allay those concerns necessarily with what I'm going to say. But I'm grateful for the opportunity, because I think this is where the dialogue starts. It starts with getting all stakeholders in the room. It starts with assuring that those entities that are responsible for growth are at the table and contributing constructively to this. I have the privilege of overseeing the Association of American Chambers of Commerce of Latin America and the Caribbean, ACLA as it's known by its symbols. It's a 53-year-old network of AmChams across 23 countries in the region, whose 20,000 members account for more than 80% of US investment in the region. Imperative to me in my brief comments today is that I effectively convey two core messages: the extent to which the US business community is embracing its role in addressing the topics at hand, and the priority we place on partnering with all stakeholders to advance solutions to the vexing challenges we jointly confront in the areas of inclusion, innovation, and integration. It's the inclusion component of today's discussion where I'm focusing the balance of my remarks, out of the belief that spurring enhanced social and socioeconomic participation in the global economy is the first and most important step in improving global living standards and eradicating poverty. It's important to acknowledge up front the fervent belief of the US Chamber that capitalism, free markets, and free trade have done more than any other approach to advance the human condition. What makes free enterprise successful and unique are the values that drive it: freedom, responsibility, individual initiative, and recognition of the inherent worth and dignity of every individual. No other system allows individuals to achieve that dignity through their own initiative and hard work. We are clear-eyed about the fact that many don't share this perspective, and we're committed to intently listening to, considering, and acting upon their points of view. We also must be honest with ourselves that capitalism and free enterprise possess numerous inherent flaws and shortcomings, which many have eloquently outlined today. We need no other reminder than the wreckage of the 2008 financial crisis and the uneven and unequal recovery that's ensued to underscore this point. It's why the Chamber joined the first meeting of the Inclusive Capitalism Coalition to address the insufficient economic inclusion and integration that helped trigger the crisis and its aftermath. Last year, we joined an innovative new initiative titled Business for Inclusive Growth, as I understand it, endorsed and supported by Minister Le Maire and President Macron. Just yesterday, the top business associations of the B7, the business component of the G7, met at the US Chamber in Washington to consider how best to deploy this plan and others like it in pursuit of inclusive and meaningful growth. Skepticism about business's intent towards these efforts is warranted. Our burden of proof is high. And that's why I submit that we have nothing short of a moral obligation to bring reasonable solutions to the table. We also believe that economic growth is compatible and sustainable, and that economic growth is compatible with sustainability, and that's why we're urging the U.S. government to return to the Paris framework. We're also actively encouraging our environmental technology companies to prioritize applying solutions to resource-rich countries. Such endeavors are critical to a global business community that, rather than seeing itself as separate from the society in which it lives, believes it has an indispensable and unique responsibility to make them better in serving as the lone wealth creator. Empowering as many people from as many backgrounds, skill sets, and perspectives as possible is the key catalyst of an inclusive growth that expands the proverbial pie of economic wealth and spurs a virtuous cycle of societal prosperity. What the business community asks of policymakers and academia is that, rather than be deemed as an adversary, we be welcomed as a partner in this quest. Today, we do need businesses to do much more to drive meaningful solutions, but we also need public policies that will support these efforts. With this in mind, I'll leverage the opportunity of having so many leaders in this room to make a proposal. We've observed with great frustration that despite tremendous innovations in food systems, millions around the globe suffer from malnutrition, in part because a third of all food gets wasted on its way from farm to fork. We're working with our members in the space to bring fruition urgently needed ideas on transformation of food systems, but much more can be done by ensuring that these innovators are partnering closely with difference-making institutions like the World Bank and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, also represented here today. I want to take a minute to flag some of the specific things we are doing to prioritize inclusion in trade and business, before concluding by detailing how we're addressing what we deem to be its greatest threat. The Chamber has staunchly supported high-standard free trade agreements, because in addition to improving market access for business and lowering costs for consumers, they contribute to strengthening the rule of law by requiring our partners to provide a transparent and predictable legal framework. We vehemently oppose tariffs levied by the U.S. because their imposition and subsequent retaliation amount to attacks borne by our country's businesses and its most vulnerable consumers. We actively oppose unilateral sanctions, given the devastating and unintended consequences they bring to those we most want to empower, such as the long-suffering people of Venezuela and the nascent Cuban private sector. Beyond trade, our member companies are pioneering financial inclusion solutions that provide access and credit to the previously unbanked. We're also supporting legislation to enhance diversity of corporate boards, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because there's overwhelming evidence that greater diversity on corporate boards translates to more viewpoints and a deeper understanding of customers, employees, and communities. And we are actively advancing women's empowerment initiatives, again, not because it's the correct approach, and I'm glad to hear so many talking about it today, but because multiple studies demonstrate that women possess superior leadership skills. I need look no further than my own household for proof of that. As mentioned, I'll conclude by highlighting what we deem to be the biggest impediment to enhancing global economic inclusion: lack of adherence to rule of law. After all, corruption and poor governance constitute the antithesis of inclusion. They do nothing but serve to reinforce a status quo of economic inequality. Our American chambers became actively involved in efforts to bolster rule of law a decade ago, after hearing in annual surveys of ACLA AmChams that poor governance was the most significant impediment to doing business in our region. And make no mistake, a first step in the process was one of recognition of the private sector's complicity in degradation of the rule of law. What started as an exercise assessing the business climate in 10 countries in the Americas has evolved into an effort which now tracks 90 global markets. That's because examples of deficiency in governance and adherence to rule of law can be found anywhere, including in my own country. Key to our efforts has been the publication of a biannual dashboard that aggregates results of publicly available studies to isolate those variables most pertinent to doing business. At the crux of this measurement is how a given market fares in 5 key areas: transparency, predictability, stability, accountability, and due process. Where these factors are present, investment thrives, economies grow, jobs are created, and prosperity follows. Where they are absent, corruption thrives, informality reigns, investment dollars flee, and tax revenues plummet. What's abundantly clear is that all of our collective efforts simply haven't been enough. The Odebrecht scandal that touched 11 countries that Jose Antonio was talking about is a stark reminder, 11 countries in our region, is a stark reminder that, to all of us that our work to stamp out the scourge of corruption and poor governance is only beginning. If there's a silver lining, it's that the sheer size and audacity of the scandal make it impossible for our region to continue to turn a blind eye to a decades-long problem. Indeed, every crisis breeds opportunity, and we use the occasion of the 2018 Summit of the Americas in Lima to make meaningful private sector commitments directly to gathered heads of state. Together with our longtime partners at the Inter-American Development Bank and major hemispheric business associations, we pledge to promote transparency and integrity in business dealings throughout the region through measures including adoption of comprehensive corporate codes of conduct and regional implementation of best practices in public procurement and PPPs. Much work has been done in the interim to implement these and other growth-oriented measures put forward in Lima, and since many of you around the room are IDB governors, I'll hope to see you at the March annual meeting in Barranquilla, where we will be sharing an update on next steps. Once again, it's been my great privilege to participate in today's workshop, and I take with me much more in the way of learnings than I could have ever contributed. I reiterate the U.S. business community's commitment to work with all stakeholders towards expanding economic inclusion, and I look forward to our next steps together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neil. Indeed, we appreciate your contribution, and of course, bringing in also the topic of malnutrition. We are in the capital of agriculture in Rome.
Yes, exactly.
So definitely this has to be a very important topic in the agenda.